Imagine you find yourself with a big pile of cash and now you're trying to decide what to do with it.
Fun coupons! See that?
Some of you may choose to go on a wild shopping spree.
Shopping!
But since you're here on my channel, I know that you're looking at different ways that you can invest the money. So you could put that money in the stock market, but right now stocks are pretty overvalued. And then, well, we have bonds, but bonds are boring. But what about in the bank, putting it in cash? Well, last time I checked, banks are paying nothing. So what are you supposed to do? So a good buddy of mine found himself in this exact situation. He came across a big chunk of money, and you're gonna find out how much that exactly was. Just a quick hint, it's a few commas, some zeros. Yeah, it's a lot of money. So let's find out where he decided to invest his big chunk of cash. Let's go. What's going on, y'all? So I've got a friend, colleague. Is it a colleague? I guess you can call that like in the blogging space. But I've known Larry for quite some time. We'll call it friendly competitors in the personal finance space. And that's the one thing that's so interesting about if you're a personal finance blogger is that you have really good connections with a lot of people that are in that same space. But he currently, I guess, is no longer in the personal finance space technically, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Larry, go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
Sure. Let's see. I just, where do you want me to start? I mean, in terms of the personal finance blog, I started the blog Investor Junkie back in 2009, and grew it to over 3 million visitors a year, and then in 2018 sold it for 6 million. So that was purely affiliate marketing revenue. And like you said, we were both competitors. I mean, the interesting thing is, in the blogosphere, it's kind of funny. We're competitors, but we're discussing ideas and ways to better monetize and better create websites through conferences like FinCon. So it's kind of interesting how even though we were competitors, we were still we'd discuss some of the secrets that we would do.
So just in case those who are listening didn't hear, you just kind of like just set out a number and it was really quick. you said you started investorjunkie.com back in 2009. Is that correct?
Yes.
So started in 2009 and then sold it, I believe it was last year.
2018 actually. So it's now going on over 3 years now.
So started something from scratch, 2009, 2018, sold it, and then what was that number again, just in case?
It was 6 million.
6 million. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody heard that, because for those that don't think that you can't make money blogging, or that you can't start a blog and sell it for a premium, like it is possible. It takes a lot of work, but it is possible. The thing I was really curious to know was, somebody listening to this is like, oh, well, if he started this thing, then he must have some investing background. He must have some sort of web data background. What got you into blogging? And then also what got you into the personal finance investing space?
Well, I mean, so I'd started developing websites back in 1993, 94. And I actually worked for an ad agency creating some of the very first websites out there for a lot of the Fortune 500 companies. So I've been developing websites both for other companies and for myself for many years. And really the genesis in 2009 was I was frustrated developing sites for other companies, seeing how they were making money off of them, seeing how they were profitable. And actually what the light bulb, kind of the proverbial light bulb went off in my head, was seeing a site called Bankaholic, right, in 2008, I think it was, that sold for around 12 million. And it was pretty much a one-man show. And that just kind of got my gears turning that, well, I could create a personal finance blog. I had active interest in finance for many years, back in probably even college. I was interested in investing and personal finance. So I really kind of put those two together and said, why don't I create a blog on investing? Because they're really looking out there in the investment space blogs. There really weren't that many that spoke to me, both in terms of having decent sizable assets already, and then something that was just wanting to review the various services out there. This was kind of the start of fintech, really, in 2009. And I saw the opportunity just to mix all that together and create a blog, and grew it from there.
And so for those that are listening to this, what I want you to hear, because those that know me know that I'm a certified financial planner. As far as I can tell, Larry, you're not a CFP, you're not a CPA, you're not an investment advisor, you don't have any series licenses. So, I think a lot of people may suffer from like imposter syndrome as like, well, how can I start a blog about investing when I'm not quote unquote qualified to talk about investing? Was that difficult for you? Like when you first started, did you ever have any of those little inner critics like saying like, gosh, like, do I need to be talking about this stuff? Like, should I leave this up to the professionals? Did you ever have to get those barriers?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There was definitely that imposter syndrome that went on a little bit with myself and kind of made me like, I mean, to me, you kind of create a blog. Either you create a blog as an expert or you create a blog as if let's all us together go down this path ourselves, this journey, and let's figure this stuff out. And I kind of want that second route. That's not to say I didn't talk about investing in what I knew. Like I'm not an active day trader as an example, so I can't speak about, technical analysis and stuff like that. But I could talk about the fundamentals of asset allocation, just basics of investing, and, could talk more intelligently than others out there. Because of really, I mean, you know as well as I do that the lack of knowledge in personal finance is just pretty lacking. And it's not really taught anywhere, formally or informally. So where do you learn it? And it's usually through friends and family. And in my case, again, going back to the early 90s when I was still in school, in fact, my parents weren't really great at finance. And I really didn't know anyone to speak about it. So I really turned to books and radio programs to help educate myself. And nowadays it's, via blogs and YouTube channels such as yourself. I mean, that's really the key is people are looking in mass. I mean, same thing with TikTok even. TikTok is huge into now personal finance investing. The reason is because of people actively want to figure out how to get better at finance, and there's really no good way to do it.
I love that. Did not realize that we shared a similarity in the sense that our parents were not good at finance and investing, and everything that we learned, it was on our own. It wasn't until I started learning on my own where I started then talking to other people to where then I started like getting knowledge from others, but definitely that was not coming within the household at all.
No.
So that's interesting to hear. So then, you start the blog, and how soon were you able to start actually making, so you started this Investor Junkie. Was this your full-time gig at the time, or did you have a full?
No, I had my web hosting business, web development business besides that. So I started it technically part-time as a side hustle. Initially, I created the blog at minimum. Again, I thought of the idea of affiliate marketing to be the way to monetize it, right? But I thought of, I thought of as at minimum to showcase what I could do to others. Here's a blog that I was able to create and build and design, and therefore I could build one for yourself as well, meaning for other customers, not necessarily for affiliate marketing based, but for other corporate, websites. And again, it really turned into a business onto its own in about probably a year and a half, where it started making more money than my web hosting business.
And at what point were you like, okay, I'm done with the web hosting business and I'm ready to do this full time?
Around that year and a half, 2 years. It's interesting. I've had a few people ask me, like, how long does it really take before you get over that hump, so to speak, of building a blog and building a website? It's about, I think, 1 to 2 years from my experience and from others. And a lot of other bloggers, I think, give up, honestly, much earlier than that. I was at one point almost giving up myself in that sense of I didn't really see it go anywhere. And it just takes a while. If you're using SEO as the main way to drive traffic, it just takes, about a year, 2 years before it really, starts working for you. SEO is definitely a long game. It's something that you couldn't just, build content or write content and the next day it just ranks in Google. It doesn't work that way. It takes, a long time for Google to figure things out. And therefore you have to be constantly writing on whatever your niche is, and not, obviously with people who are not familiar with SEO, we can definitely discuss that if you want, but SEO is definitely something that you have to understand, not necessarily try to game Google and how to rank, trick Google to rank for your content, but better, what can you do to make sure you're writing content that facilitates for not only the users, but Google as well.
No, that's great. And absolutely, because I know when I started my blog, initially it was not to monetize, because I didn't know that was a thing. So for me, it was trying to get a new clients in the financial planning practice. But then when I figured out, I can monetize, and I was very limited because of compliance and everything. But it took about 9 months for one to get my first client, because of them finding me through search traffic on Google, which was SEO efforts. Then also when I figured out I could monetize, the first, I always share this, is like the very first check I ever made from Google, which a Google AdSense check, was $152 and some change. And, for many that are, publishing, writing, writing guest posts, working on backlinks, you've been doing this for just under almost a year, and all you have to show for it is like $152. That's not something that you want to brag about to other people.
I mean, yes and no. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with me. Like I've made my first affiliate check. It was like, I don't remember the exact amount, but let's say $50 or something little like that. It's not a lot of money, but it kind of, I guess, is a proof of concept. It's ironic that it's like any business I've started. It's that first dollar that gets into the business, you kind of like, this is really real. This is possible. And it kind of, with affiliate marketing, without question, is the ability to scale, if done effectively and right, can definitely scale into a six-figure, in some cases, seven-figure business if you really plan it out properly. So, I mean, but the thing that's interesting in your case, I remember reading a few not only reading a few articles from you, but also YouTube. You had a YouTube video, I think, discussed your first check, if I remember correctly, and how you only made, originally your site was purely a lead gen, right? And that's great. But it's something that, I think in affiliate marketing, you could do much better, and you did. And it's interesting in your case, especially being a registered advisor, right? You had legal restrictions that I didn't have, ironically. So I actually had freedom to do things that you couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like, I was up against guys like yourself, guys and gals like yourself that, weren't licensed, weren't technically professionals, where, if you want to write about a Vanguard mutual fund and, share your entire experience, like you could. Me, I'd have to get that approved, through my legal compliance department.
Yep.
And they would never approve me talking about the competition, especially if it was something, favorable. That was like, no, you couldn't even do that. Gosh.
I mean, yeah, the rules in finance are kind of weird. I mean, even the same thing with, you would think, right, for a review, you'd want to actually use that product, right? Let's say Betterment is a great example. That, to me, I would love to really get into hands-on and really use the product. And unfortunately, with the current SEC rules, FTC rules, you can't actually be an investor in a said product and then write a review about it, ironically. So therefore, you're writing about it from afar, and you really don't get the hands-on, like compared to the niche I'm in now, where I can do web hosting reviews. I can actually buy an account with a web hoster, actually touch it, feel it, use it, get real, actual, honest opinion and usage of it. Where in the personal finance investment space, you can't do that.
Well, hey, Larry, the reason I want to have you come on is because not to talk about selling your site, which should be an amazing conversation, but really it's kind of like the next chapter. So you sold your site, investorjunkie.com. Now you have your personal domain, larryludwig.com, which I'll have a link in the description of the show notes, just talking about affiliate marketing, SEO. But recently you published a case study on the process you went to buying a site, buying a blog. And I just found that fascinating, from many different aspects. But really, I loved in this article, and once again, I'll have a link that you guys can check out, is that, you're looking at this as an investment. And, right now in the current investment space, you were kind of analyzing, okay, could I put this in real estate? Could I put this in stocks and bonds? And I think for many, that are, thinking about investing, we think about stocks and mutual funds and ETFs. Maybe it's crypto, but not a lot of people think as a blog or a website as an investment. So I'm just kind of curious, when you started looking at your current portfolio, what was it about looking at a blog as a website? Like, why did you think that was something that you should look at?
Multiple reasons. I think the first and foremost, and it's interesting on Investor Junkie, right? I always considered investing to be much more holistic, right? I consider investing more than just purely the traditional asset classes, meaning owning a business as well. And it's interesting over the years, I originally had content on Investor Junkie that talked about owning a business. And after a bunch of surveys with the audience that came to the site, it found out that people wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't want to hear anything about owning a business. They just wanted not necessarily the 5 stock tips, but they wanted the basics of personal finance and investing. So we slowly removed that content off the blog. And it's funny how, I've always considered owning a business as something that it definitely has advantages compared to other types of asset classes and other types of investments, in that you have ultimately control, success, and or failure. The skill sets in yourself obviously have the ability to grow or make that business a huge failure. So I wanted something that, just based on what the current valuations of where everything's at, both in terms of, at least as of today's writing, where things are. And ironically, today, the stock market was down 600 points as the last I checked this morning for the Dow. The overall markets are not cheap by any historical standards. So it's like, where do you get the best bang for your buck, as a value play, as something where you're looking where can you get the best return for that money? And stocks, bonds, and real estate, honestly, at least for me right now, are not it. And that's where it kind of goes into a business. That's not to say every person should go out and create an affiliate blog and start from, create a business. Clearly, not everyone has the skills to do that. But the ones that do, I think, to their advantage, or whatever skill you may have, it's to your advantage to perhaps maybe create a business at that.
When you started looking, I'm kind of curious with, if we're talking about holistic investing, you got your pie chart of like, oh, I've got so much in stocks and so much in bonds. Was there a certain percentage that you didn't want to go over, investing into the website, a blog, a non-traditional investment?
Yeah, I mean, I had a certain dollar amount for this blog, and I talked about it. The dollar amount I paid for the blog, it came out to be $180,000. I guess for my end, I was looking at low six figure blog. Not only in terms of, this is technically, well, it's not the first business I've acquired, but it's the first blog I've acquired, and wanted to make sure. That's not to say in the future I may do more, actually, but for now I wanted to start with this one. It was a decent sized blog, decent established blog. And it's something where I wanted to, I could have taken something smaller perhaps, but I didn't necessarily want to go to, say, 7 figures or higher 6 figures. I just didn't think I wanted to take the risk at the moment. So not purely asset allocation, but how much also the opportunity was as well. In other words, if you look at it like a house, that's the analogy I use, right? If you're building, you buy a house that's just really dilapidated and needs a lot of work, what's the opportunity perhaps to grow that business, or in this case, real estate, in over multiple years? It was something that I did. It wasn't necessarily asset allocation, to make a long story short. It was just a matter of what I felt comfortable with investing at this moment.
What do you think is, and you mentioned this in, the blog post talking about, the pros and cons, and I'd be curious just your thoughts on, worst case scenarios. You
all goes boom.
You put a big chunk of money in, and what are some of the potential things that could happen? Obviously, I'll let you answer some of these.
Every business has, every investment, every business has risk. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, to me, it was, obviously the current rankings of the content could go literally to zero. For some reason, let's say something I didn't know about, without getting into too much detail. Let's say there's something the seller didn't reveal about the backlinks or just overall setup of the site, and Google decides to just ban it outright, because that's right now most of the traffic is coming from search. So that could go to zero. The affiliates could just all dry up and disappear. Unlikely for this space, because of they've been around for many years, in some cases as early as the web, as far as affiliate programs. Some of the web hosting, so the niche on the blog I bought is in web hosting, and reviews and comparison of various services out there. So the chances of the affiliate marketing for that space to disappear and dry up is kind of unlikely. There are other spaces. Ironically, the previous space with investing I was in had a lot of fintech startups, and there were venture capital startups. So they were not profitable. So those can and had disappeared over many years, as you probably well know too. Is there definitely businesses that were very successful with affiliate marketing programs that just literally dried up overnight. So that's definitely another risk. Outside of that, just it comes down to really ultimately my skill sets and my incompetence, or my hubris of thinking I could build it better and ultimately increase the rankings in Google, which I think I can, because of my background has shown that. For many years I've been doing SEO and just overall building sites, but who knows? In addition to the investment side of this, the way that I'm hearing you talking about this, this is exciting for you as well, right? Like, this is like a challenge. Like, you want to see what you can do with this. You want to. It's somewhat of an ego thing that you want to see. Was it a fluke the first time you did it? Was it something that you could build out another site? It's also something to keep. Obviously, I'm at a point financially where I could just say I'm not going to do anything, which I think is silly. I don't consider myself ever wanting to formally retire, right? But it's something you want to keep actively engaged in, and this is something that's it's not a passion project in the sense of there's no revenue to generate from it, but I'm not, I'm looking at to build a business, and it's the analogy I always use is the adult form of Lego. So I'm building, a business, and from that, let's see what happens with it.
Let's talk a little bit about valuation, because I think this is a topic that those that are like new to business, it varies, across different industries. It varies in the blogging space, depending on like what niche you're in. I don't know like how specific you can get, but just kind of curious, looking at this site, based on how much you paid, because it looks like the initial asking price that they had was 244,000 that you shared in the case study here. So that number, talk a little bit about how the site owner used that price, what their valuation was, and then how you were able to determine what you felt a good valuation was. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ultimately with any business, it's what people are willing to pay for in the end. You could say your site is worth 10x, right? And yet, the market says otherwise. So the marketplace determines what, you can get. In the current marketplace for blogs, not only is it very liquid, there's definitely a lot of marketplaces for buying and selling blogs, ironically. It's really interesting. It's definitely something that even post-sale kind of took my surprise. I didn't realize how liquid of a market it is. So there are constantly hundreds of blogs being sold on a regular basis. And that being said, the multiples really vary. It depends on the income, depends on, I've seen as low as 1 times annual earnings for a blog, but I've seen blogs that can go, we've seen some publicly, right? One of them I think was valued around 12x, which is, I forget the name of the blog off the top. My Student Loan Hero, I think, was one of them. That was really valued really high. In terms of annual earnings, it depends. It could be anywhere from 3 to 5. The seller of the blog I bought originally was asking 244, which came out to be, 4x, I believe I said, the annual income, which is around 65,000 a year. So the question, again, comes down to what other options can you put that money into? And again, with the money I had literally sitting in a savings account was earning 0.6% interest rates, right? It's not even covering the annual rate of inflation we have right now. So where can you get a business that has a more or less a 33% return, or a stock for that matter? Where can you get a 33% return, even if it halves? Let's say I majorly screw up the site and it generates half the income that originally was discussed previously for the blog. I'm still earning 15-16% annually, so it's still something decent.
Yeah,
my goal obviously, my goal is obviously to try to increase it more than that, but who knows? Like you said, the part of the risks are what happens if it halves. That's the questions that you have to kind of ask yourself with any business like this. In this case, you or I probably do this because we've done it for years, so it's pretty easy to buy another blog. But someone who's just I totally don't recommend this for someone who's never done a blog before. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, because if you're not knowing what you're doing, you could literally screw it up. We've seen some examples in the personal finance space. I'm not going to name names, that literally imploded the blog and goes from generating decent revenue to literally zero.
Oh, I won't name names either, but both Larry and I have seen big companies spend a lot of money on these personal finance blogs, and within like a year to 2, it's either they don't exist or they just ram into the ground. And like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, we're going to spend all this money and then basically do nothing with it. Or it's kind of like if I were to buy a restaurant, like an Indian restaurant, like, oh, they're making good money, I'm going to go buy this Indian restaurant. I don't even like Indian food. I know nothing about running a restaurant. So the fact that I think that I can come in and like not only make money from this thing, but grow it, it's silly. And I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's what it kind of feels like. They're buying the traffic and they think they have this good asset, but man, if you don't know how to take care of it and nurture it and continue to run it how it has been run, like so don't just buy something based on past number thinking that you know what you're doing. I love the fact that you bought something that was, because I know you've mentioned that you had this hosting company. It's one of those things like I knew you after that, so like I don't really think of you. I just think of you as an investor junkie. So that's a little bit about your background. And I love the fact that for those that don't know, like when you get into blogging and eventually, like, you also enjoy talking about SEO and affiliate marketing and all this stuff. Like, it's just, you kind of have to just, you have to learn it, to somewhat understand it. So of course, like, you were going to enjoy talking about it to an extent.
I mean, it's interesting. So like I said, I've been developing and hosting websites. Geez, my first hosting business was in 1997. So I did it for a little over 20 years. Because I actually, when I sold my blog in 2018, I decided to also shut down the hosting finally. So I have a lot of background, a lot of history in it, which is great. I mean, ironically, my weak spot at 2009 was SEO. I actually, prior to that, had a bad experience. I hired an ad agency to help me with SEO for my hosting business. It just failed miserably. And ultimately, with the blog I bought or created Investor Junkie, I should say, I just wanted to learn it. I knew it was an important skill. So it's a skill I just really studied, looked at what worked, started building things out, and it finally, kind of hit a stride and built out Investor Junkie from that. And it's something that, it's ironic that the education I got from building that business just can't even compare to any course, to any formal teaching I ever got. It just allowed me to build skills that I couldn't get anywhere else. There's no formal skill in business making 101, right? There's no college class you can take on that.
This might backfire, me asking this, but I did a video, I think I also did a blog post on this, where I took the stance that starting a blog is better than getting an MBA. Obviously, starting a blog where you're talking about your family, and posting, pictures like once or twice a week, like, that's not what I'm talking about. Essentially, like, I was talking about starting a blog with the intent of building a business and then building a business and everything that I've learned through that.
Yeah,
I gained so much more than that. It is actually, it's very interesting because, I also have this financial planning practice, that I also grew. But even that, when I started that, I was a W-2 employee. So there was like this training that they go through, doing cold calls and all this stuff. But on the blogging side, like, that was pure, like, that was me trying to figure it out on my own. And because of that, like, I had to really go out there and just figure it out. And I learned so much more, just even like networking and how to network, sending emails, and which is like, you think is silly, but the truth is like, man, like, that is networking, getting somebody to first open an email and also respond and know how to do that effectively. I mean, these are things that they don't teach. And you don't, you learn just by doing it. So curious your thoughts on that stance, that starting a blog as a business, do you feel like that is better than getting the MBA?
I mean, with the cost for MBA, not to say outright an MBA value, the cost for it's not worth it, but it definitely, you question with the current cost for college. I don't know. I think you can spend a few $1,000s and get, go the route of hard knocks and do much better, because you definitely have to learn, you kind of alluded to it as well, marketing. You have to really understand good copywriting, things that were taught formally, right? For how to write. It's ironic, how to write for school, right? I'm having my kids are in high school and junior high, and it's how to write for school and for a term paper, let's say, it's completely different than copywriting for the web. Mm-hmm. And people get so much, things like double spaces after a period and stupid things like that you don't do online, or really long paragraphs. The only way you can learn that stuff is really by understanding what, how people react to the content you create. I mean, a lot of psychology, a lot of marketing comes into building a blog, because of ultimately, be it your own product or someone else's through affiliate marketing, you have to understand what motivates that person to want to buy your product. Listening to features of a product doesn't necessarily motivate a person to buy. No one looks for a drill. They look for a hole. They want to drill a hole. So that's why they buy a drill, not that it has the ability of variable speeds and reverse capability and having all these drill bits. They want to be able to put a hole in their wall. So you have to understand, with marketing and good copywriting, what motivates a person to do what they want to do. And most people, I think, lose out. Even I've seen so many business owners fail at that, both in terms of, I initially started out that way too. I think everyone does to a degree. Is like with my web hosting business, I sold on features. I sold on the amount of disk space and the amount of bandwidth and the amount of whatever. No one cared about that. They cared about, did this, can I create a blog or a website for your service and not have it fail? And that's really where the light bulb kind of went off after a few years.
Yeah, that's so good. I was looking over your case study here. The one thing I was curious about, you mentioned like some different places. I'm sure somebody listening to this, if they're, interested about this, maybe I want to buy a blog, and you mentioned some of the different places you can go, some of the different marketplaces, Flippa, Empire Flippers, Investors Club, Website Flip, it looks like is the one. Is it the one that you went through?
That's the one that has an aggregate. They have they actually take the different services like Flippa, or actually soon to be Flippa, I think, and put it on one website. So it makes it easier to find all this content. Instead of going to different marketplaces, you go to one. But I actually bought mine on Empire Flippers.
Curious on, so when you finally found a domain that you were interested in, you made the offer. What was the timeline of making that offer, them accepting, and then you having control, of the site where you start making money?
So let's see, I came back from Florida in beginning of August, just happened to be looking on empireflippers.com and saw they had this listing, and this listing's been there for a few months because I kind of got frustrated. I've been on and off looking for a blog for about 6 months to a year. And just everyone I found either was just not the niche I wanted to be in, or just priced really too crazy, or had other issues such as what's called PBNs, public, backlinks that were just not really organic but bought. And I didn't want to get into those issues. So you kind of, again, this goes back to, you have to kind of know what you're looking for and know the market pretty well. This is definitely not something you just start off buying a blog and without knowing anything about potential scam issues or other issues with the blog itself. So after finding this blog in August, I made the offer. I actually contacted the agent at Empire Flippers. And initially I went for 2x, and it was just like, no way. They're not going to go for that amount, because we just initially reject offers because the marketplace is demanding, I think, a minimum of 3x. So I went for 3x and they accepted it. And in terms of, it really depends on the blog and it depends on the business. With Empire Flippers, they kind of handhold you, which is actually one of the nice things. If you're really the first acquisition, they actually walk you through the process of making sure all the things are documented, making sure there's no issues along the way. So they're actually pretty good in that respect. But if you, let's say, go to Flippa and actually buy a blog there, you're pretty much on your own. You have to make sure everything is not only legit, but figure out a way to make sure escrow for money and make sure the domain and the website are all transferred over to you properly. And there are ways to do that, but it's something that you have to do yourself. So it definitely makes it a little bit more. It definitely, like, I could have done it, but I did that for my blog. I sold eventually, but for someone who's never done it before, definitely an Empire Flippers is probably a way to go. And it's not, I'm not by any way recommending. I get no commission for recommending Empire Flippers. They're definitely, I have some issues with their service as well, in terms of they definitely, since they're a seller broker, they have to kind of price things out to the advantage of the seller in order for them to get the best commission too. So I don't know, the prices definitely are more priced to perfection than, say, if a Flippa. You can definitely get a better deal. So I wound up buying for 3x the annual income. So I would say not a horrible deal, but in this marketplace, it's kind of what things are going for. So it's decent. So the upside is I'm looking, what can I do to improve that blog? What things can I better monetize or increase the traffic over time? That's kind of the way I look at it, where obviously all things being equal, let's say it still stays stagnant, the income it generates, it's only about 33% a year as far as return. So it's still not bad. That being said, it took about 4 weeks to finally acquire the blog completely. And that's, again, with Empire Flippers going through the process. I was trying to help. If anything, I would have done it in a few days if it was done by me, just because I wanted to get over and take control of it and make sure everything was done. But I did all the research ahead of time. I planned things out and actually put an updated version of the site the day I formally had control of the blog, which is about 2 weeks ago as of the time of this recording.
I was on a call with Larry, I think it was last week, and that's when he shared that he bought this domain. And as right now, he's not making the domain public. The one thing, though, I did find humorous was that when we were talking about it, that you were like, you didn't even know how to pronounce.
Yeah, I mean, eventually the goal, and I talked about this a little bit, the goal eventually is to merge with the website, my own personal brand. So I'm not looking for having a personal brand. Investor Junkie was its own domain or brand onto itself, which I did on purpose. I mean, nowadays I'm doing my own personal brand and building out that as being the web hosting expert and overall blog expert and discussing various, things like SEO, affiliate marketing, what have you. So I don't have any desire to sell, but if I were to sell, I would probably create a separate brand. And I'm right now thinking with the brand I bought, the goal is eventually point all the website content, links to my site. It just needs still a lot of work to improve on that site.
But I just want to share that because you can also spend a lot of money on a business that's going to make you money, and you don't even have to be able to pronounce it. Like, that's my big takeaway.
Well, I mean, in the end, I wasn't. If it was the domain name, without mentioning the domain name, is kind of not an easy to remember domain name, and it really is tied to the other person's name. Sort of, it has part of his name and the last name in the domain name, so it's not ideal. It's like having my name, it would be Ludwig, host or something like that. It's just not really appropriate. Where from my end, I was buying it for just, it had a good backlinks, it had good affiliate relationships, it had good traffic. Previously, it had, it has a lot of stuff in place. What it needs is just an overhaul. Again, going back to the analogy of a house, it's got good bones, it just needs a lot of work. And then eventually I'll plan on merging it to my site. It's just a matter of, I think I'll probably be waiting like 6 months to a year before I formally do that.
Larry, as we wrap up here, I'd be curious, now that you've gone through this process once, it seems so far it is successful. I know it's still kind of new. Is there anything that you've learned going through this process now that if you do this again, which you mentioned that you would consider doing this again, that you do different?
Good question. Probably would not do Empire Flippers just because, again, the price, unless I get a really good deal there. If I guess for future purchases, I would go for something, but it's very hard to find lower multiples in this day and age. Again, you and I both have the same issue. You and I being in the marketplace have the issue of everyone else is trying to find good investments, right? And it's driving up prices in stuff like blogs. So it's very hard to find a blog for sale formerly, that gets a low multiple. It'd be nice to get a great deal, but it's not, I don't think it's that doable. So unless they're not on the market and they're thinking about selling, like in other words, they're not advertising anywhere, maybe you can reach them ahead of time, go out and contact bloggers that haven't been updating their blog in a few months and see if they're interested in selling. I know a few friends have done that and done really well with that. They can get usually much lower multiples because of, as we were talking off air before the call, before this chat, I think blogs need to be constantly worked on. I think creating a blog and then just sitting on it, especially the multiples that people are asking for nowadays, would be silly to do that. It's best to sell it because a blog, gets out of date, the content gets out of date. Google realizes he hasn't seen new content lately, so it starts decreasing the ranking for that site. Especially if you're relying on SEO, it's going to usually go down to a death spiral, and it's really very hard to get out of it.
Awesome, Larry, man. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience and just this whole process. For those that want to learn more about what you've got, where can they check you out?
My personal site, LarryLudwig.com.
Awesome. Larry, I appreciate your time, man. This has been good. I've learned a lot. I know everyone listening has learned a lot. So we appreciate you.